afternoon, everyone. It's 2:08 Miami time on the East Coast. Today we have a very, very wonderful guest from the West Coast, and we make him reschedule his morning routine a little bit. So I'm very excited to welcome everyone. I know that today joining us is not only students, but also alum. Maybe some of you are from business community. And allow me to introduce myself, Joanne Lee, Dean of FIU Business. We're so happy that you are joining us today. And this series called the BizPanther Game Changer Success Stories. It's really an initiative started by our advancement team, and I want to give credit to them, and also our event team for their support today. So the goal for a Game Changer Success Stories is to bring a real life alum that is part of FIU Business to come share some of the stories and insight they have through their successful career. And today, the topic is reality versus learning. I'm sure students are eager to hear, what do you mean by that? Reality versus learning with Van Chestnut. And Van actually got a BBA from us in 1978. And this is really fun to get Van, and I am sure when you're listening on, you will know why I said that. So be patient with me. Allow me to introduce a little bit about Van's background. Van Chestnut grew up in South Florida and graduated from our FIU Business with a bachelor's in business administration. He moved to Pacific Northwest in 1979 to work for Boeing. Then after a very successful 20-year career, struck out on his own as an independent computing consultant, work he still does today. He visits South Florida a couple of times a year to check on families and friends, and of course, stop by to hang out with FIU Business. And so we often see Van, happy traveler, coming to Miami. Now, after moving to Pacific Northwest, Van traveled quite a bit for Boeing, but still had a yearning to see the world. His horizons expanded to include not only Europe, but parts of the Pacific, including Fiji, Tahiti, Australia. And after most of vacation's time, he's the lucky person, he wrote travel journals, which ended up becoming the basis for his books, Push the Red Button, and forthcoming, Why I Travel. And I read a little bit about the Push the Red Button. It's really hilarious. Somewhere along the way, Van found the time to write Brian and the Storm in hopes of helping children who live in hurricane-prone areas know that they are not alone in what they might experience in such a storm. It's an illustrated children's book. I also read that one too. So Van is a big believer in students, and as such, also our one and only funder of the B Student Scholarship at FIU Business. So welcome to the program, everyone, but more so, let me say hi to my friend from the West Coast. How are you, Van? How's your morning so far? Had your coffee yet? Ooh, fantastic. Now, I want to start by reversing the order because, our audience already learned a little bit about your background, but share with us why you started a B Student Scholarship. Why B Student?
Well, the real reason I wanted a B Student Scholarship is it's my way of giving back. I was a B student, so I know what it's like to be trying to go to school and work at the same time and have a family and all of this, and it's not easy. So most of the scholarships that are out there are for A students, and A students, to me, they're spending too much time and focusing too much on learning. While that's not a bad thing, it can take away from your personal life, and you really need a good personal life, work, school balance in order to be a complete person. One of the things that I told the dean a little while ago was when I first started at Boeing, I ran into a gentleman in my department who had gone to school at the University of Washington. And he had gotten really good grades, like A's. But when I started talking to him about other things that were not academic related, he just spaced out. And he, like if I talked about Europe or anything like that, or travel, he said, well, I went to school to get good grades. And when I got out of class and got the A on the exam, it went right out of my mind. And I thought to myself, what's the point of going to school? You know, you may be able to get a good grade and get a good job, but you're not going to be able to enjoy and expand your horizons. So essentially, that's why I wanted to start a B student scholarship. It's what I was, so I want people to be able to take advantage of what I learned and what I did.
So Van, you know, you're talking to academic dean here. I'm trying to ask my student to do really well, but it's very interesting. You brought up the idea of most of our students really work a lot, and actually, according to statistics, over 60-something% of our students work over 25 hours a week while going to school full time. We have, you know, in FIU business committed to that identity of serving this group of students, that, you know, they have to balance the work and their life and their schoolwork and all kind of thing. Now, so let me pause a little bit and just to welcome our audience again. If you just join us, I want you to know today is almost like a fireside chat with Van Chestnut, our alum from 1978. And our goal today is talk a little bit about reality versus learning. And so in front of you is Van, and of course your dean. And I want to make sure that you know what we want to do is we'll carve out probably around 15-20 minutes at the tail end for you to ask questions, ask a real person, right? Because in times like the COVID-19, we all got isolated. It is like a very precious moment to be together. So today we're going to serve the purpose, and it will be a really relaxed conversation. Feel like you're talking to friends, right? So if you want to ask a question, you're welcome to do so. If you look at the Zoom panel at the very bottom, you see Q&A over there. You can click on Q&A. You can ask your question there, and I will be your translator to, you know, read your question to Van so they can answer you. Now, Van, let me go back to a little bit. We just stopped off by talking about work-life balance. I want to hear from you. Right now, you're fairly successful. You're doing a lot of things. You're giving a scholarship. You've been traveling around the world, or not the last year. But I want to know, what do you mean by work-life balance? When people ask me, right, Dean, what is your work-life balance? I chuckle. I say, I really don't have any. So I want to hear from you. How do you achieve a work-life balance?
Well, that's an interesting question. I got to relate this to an interesting story. Not long after I moved up to here to Seattle, and I was working for Boeing, I was traveling a lot, and I gotten divorced, and had met someone, and I was seeing her quite a bit, and we were going to a wedding at the Space Needle downtown, and you know, I told her that I was going to be going to Southern California the next week and spending a couple more weeks down there. And she turned to me and she said, so how much software do I have to buy to spend more time with you?
Oh,
And I thought to myself, I'm traveling too much. And it was a very telling moment, but you have to devote time to your family and friends in order to you know, keep yourself in a good state of mind. Today with COVID, you know, and all of the stress where we're doing Zooms and things like that, it's hard mentally. And just being with friends, whether you're having dinner or going out on the boat or going fishing or whatever, you need that as a mental release. And if you're devoting all your time to your studies, it's going to be detrimental, and you won't be able to make as good of decisions, or you won't be able to function as well as you do when you have time off or with family or with friends. So it's kind of an important thing. Did I answer your question?
yes. Very good, because it's hard and it's only getting harder. I can relate to some of my students and some of my candidates from graduate school, right? And they're only 24 hours. Often you ask yourself, well, how can I balance it when I have like responsibility towards my schoolwork, my work life, and my family? So I understand. So there will be time we have to take a pause and reflect on, really? So what I think that's really a priority of your life, right? So let me move on to the next question, which we talked about before. I'm going to refer you to this famous quote from the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher. She said, and it's quite famous, she said, watch your thoughts, for they will become actions. Watch your actions, for they will become habits. Watch your habits, for they will forge your character. Watch your character, for it will make your destiny. Now, I know that we talk a little bit about character, and I want to hear a little bit from your experience, from your travel all around the world. What role does character play in life outside of school? What do you think that Margaret Thatcher is trying to tell us to build this character so we can make our destiny?
Before I answer that, I'm going to get back to one of your first sentences that you said. So I remember one day I was driving along 36th Street there by the airport, and I pulled off there. I don't know if it was at a Burger King or McDonald's or something to get some lunch. And I remember thinking to myself, what do I really want to do with my life? And I guess I'd seen a couple of movies lately, and the answer that I came up with was, I want to be a consultant. I want to be someone that other people come to when they need something done or when they don't know how to do something. And you don't think about it much at the time, and then life goes on, and I was working in Seattle, and eventually I applied for a job I saw in the newspaper and moved to Seattle to work for Boeing. But that is what I became.
Mm-hmm.
When so your thoughts actually can become reality. I became a consultant at Boeing. Boeing sold me my services for probably 15 years doing software consulting around the country.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting that I did become what I imagined that very first time. So the other part of your question was about character. And I read a book several years ago. It was by General Schwarzkopf, who led the Allied services and during the first Gulf War. And he had a quote, and I'm gonna read it so I get it right. 99% of leadership failures are failures of character. So let me give you a classic example from current times. You're all familiar with the problem with the 737 MAX and the crashes over in Southeast Asia. And this was a result of the MCAS system, which Boeing added to the flight deck and the control of the plane. To me, what I've seen and knowing how Boeing works, I can see management saying, well, we'll just put this in. And somebody else say, well, we need to tell people and let them know how this works. But they didn't. And to me, there was a lot of, that's a character failure. And then when they were trying to, after the airplanes got grounded, say what happened and what they were doing to make things better, once again, it was failure of character and not being forthcoming and transparent that caused the problem. And they would have been much better off if they would have done the right thing right off the bat, but they didn't. And I think they lost a couple of CEOs before they got the current gentleman, Mr. Calhoun, and hopefully he's on the right track. But when this was going on, I could see from my experiences at Boeing, I knew exactly what was happening.
Right.
People weren't doing the right thing. And doing the right thing is character.
That's a very well articulated statement. I remember growing up, my parents, from Hong Kong, and always say that, right? Doing the right thing is a good thing. Do it and don't forget that, right? And you talk about being the top CEO in a very big company, and you talk about the inability to be direct, the inability to be transparent is a character flaw. And I absolutely agree with you, right? You need to really have a strong character to be direct and transparent and tell people, right or wrong, say it, right? Is that what you're trying to tell our audience here?
Yes, and I'm going to relate this to another story. I have a lot of stories.
That's good.
Uh, I had, well, I was, like I said, I was being a consultant for software. And one of my customers was Northrop in Los Angeles in Hawthorne. And I had installed some pricing and estimating software there, and pricing and estimating for government proposals. So the proposals that they are bidding on are large values, millions and millions or billions of dollars. And I got asked to go to St. Louis to talk to all of the estimators for Northrop. Okay, sounds good. And they said, Van, you have 10 minutes to talk to these people. And I thought, well, 10 minutes is not a lot of time. And I was there with two other people, and they each had either 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And I think our total allotted time was 20 minutes. So they got up and they gave their little talk, and they said, and they introduced me. This is Van. He did the software installation at Northrop in Hawthorne, and he's going to tell you a little bit about it. So I talked for about 5 minutes, and I said, do you have any questions? Well, this was an interesting questions. And after 5 minutes, they were still asking questions. After 10 minutes, they were still asking questions. After 15 minutes, they were still asking questions. But I remember one question in particular was, can the software do so-and-so? And I said, let me think. So I thought for a minute, and I said, yes. I'm not a politician, so I went to straight yes or no answers. People like yes or no answers. And I knew that if the software didn't do it, I was going to be in Los Angeles the next week. And if it didn't, I could make it do that. So the point of this story is, if you can, answer questions as briefly as possible, and don't give people too much information. Not too much information. Don't give them information that they're not really looking for. Generally speaking, they are looking for a yes and no answer. And that's always a good idea to go with that. Okay, I answered your question, I think.
Yes, you did. Now, well, easy for you to say you have a glorious, career with Boeing, and now you're like an independent consultant. Everybody come to you. You don't need to impress anyone. You already done your share, right? You can speak with authority. But for some of our younger students, starting off, with a lot of excitement in the career, think about, my goal is to try not to make mistakes. I want to impress people so that I can secure this job coming my way or the next job. But I often say that to many students of ours. I said, well, failures and mistakes do not disqualify us. What really disqualifies us is fail to use that opportunity to learn from the mistakes. Now, but of course, we are advanced age at this point, right? And our students are like, yeah, easy for you to say a dean. But I want you to talk a little bit about, hey, it's okay to make some mistake. It's okay to be agile. It's okay to use common sense and try to develop a lot of out of the box solution. What would you tell our audience? Like, okay, well, share with me how you take your first step to speak of your opinion, speak of your ideas without being worried people may laugh at it. I may make a mistake. Maybe I sound like I don't know. How do you want to encourage them?
I guess my best advice to answer that question is to listen. And you don't have to talk all the time. So the topic of this presentation is reality versus what you learn at school. So when you're learning in school and the instructors tell you how to do something, what you often learn is they'll say, this is the way you tackle this problem. And in the answer, as a student, you're thinking, well, okay, I can do that. And they may say, well, you may have a situation where it's like this. So what I'm saying is what you learn at school is often black and white. This is the way you do something. But in reality, everything is a shade of gray because you're never going to encounter exactly the circumstances for the project that you had in school. So I guess one of the things I learned early on in my time at Boeing is that the wonderful thing about standards is that there are so many to choose from. And this is, and you may think that's crazy. No, it's not. You saw that I had a cup here from China. When I was fixing to go to China a couple of years ago, I had to get photos for my wife and I for our visas to go on our passports. So I went to Costco and I got passport photos. And then I went to put them on the paper for the visa and they didn't fit. So I don't know whether I was talking to someone like my travel agent or whoever, but I ended up going back to Costco and say, I need passport photos to go to China. And he said, they're a different size. And I learned at that time that there are also different size photos for passports in other countries. Most passport photos are the same as they are in the United States, but not all of them. So fortunately, the nice people at Costco gave me Chinese passport photos, and I used those. Another example of the wonderful thing about standards is that I was in Europe off the coast of France on a ship. And as we were coming into port, I noticed that the lights for the channel were the opposite of what I learned. In South Florida, everybody has a boat and you're out in the bay or the ocean. And when you're coming back into port, there's a phrase, I think the word is a mnemonic, red, right, returning. That means keep the red light or the red buoy on your right as you come back into port. Well, it wasn't that way in France. In fact, it was just the opposite. And I was talking to someone on the bridge and he said, actually, there are about 6 different standards around the world. And I'm thinking, so if you're a sailor and you're going out sailing around the world, you could be in real trouble if you don't know what the lights are supposed to be. And in the case of where I was, it was a very foggy morning. And if I had been driving the ship, I might have run into a brick wall coming into port, and that would not have been a good thing. There was the case in the English Channel where a ship sunk and they put lights all around it, including the red and green lights to mark where the ship had sunk. And people kept running into it. And how could they miss it? Well, they did. And they ended up in this one place where the ship had sunk. 4 additional ships ran into it in the channel, even though it was well marked with the red and green and white lights. And they had I think it was a total of 4 additional ships sink. So the wonderful thing about standards is there's so many to choose from.
Right. So I think more, I'm sorry, Van, go ahead.
I was going to go off on another tangent, but I forgot what it was. Okay, back to you.
Let me bring it back to what you just talked about. Maybe what I heard you said is there's so many standards. You shall never let these standards box you in. take an open-minded viewpoint of the circumstance and stay agile and develop your solution in real life, right? I think that's what you try to say. And instead of like, but I always come to that one question, right? Well, easy for you to say you already command your career. Well, how do you tell our student that listening on today, saying that, okay, well, if I first started out, I'm a little more cautious, I'm a little bit more timid, and I want to really start all on the right foot. And so advise our student, what are the way you can communicate with people, maybe from their perspective, when you start off as a young candidate or a fresh out candidate, start of a new career, what advice will you give for our audience, how best to communicate with other people?
Well, there's a saying by a lot of consultants that to use 5 whys. If someone is explaining to you something, you ask why, or why do you think that, or why are you doing it that way? So it is often useful to ask why. So you ask why, and if you, depending on the answer, you may ask why again, and why again, and why again. And this way, you're letting the person that you're interviewing or talking to you explain exactly what they're doing. I have found on occasion that if you ask them why, they may say, well, actually, we don't really have a good reason for that, or that's the way we've always done it. That's the way we've always done it is not a good answer. And you don't want to say that to your customer, but you can often suggest something. And I have found this to be true many times, that if I'm doing a consulting project and they're telling me about the project and I ask a couple of questions and I say, well, what if we did this? And many times they have said, oh, I don't think that'll work. And then as the day goes on and you're keeping your mouth shut, you're just mostly listening, towards the end of the day, they may come around to your way of thinking.
Right.
And and this has happened to me more times than I can count. What you said, your idea might just work. But in real life, you're going to encounter people that you can make good suggestions. And no matter what you say, they aren't going to listen to you. I had a case with one project where the person came up with a very unique way of giving people email addresses. Mine would be Van Chestnut or Megan Meeks or Vanessa Lopez or whatever, but that wasn't his idea. And I tried to tell him that what he was going down, the path he was going down, was going to cause problems in the future. And he was very adamant, and he went his way. And about 2 or 3 months, well, actually a month and a half later, the idea that he had come up with was not working at all. And we had to go back to using names. Imagine that, a name for an email. But it's not always going to work. And you have to be able to accept that and just, live with it. But then a lot of times, some of the problems you encounter are people with enormous egos. And no matter what you say, it's their way and nothing's going to work. And I'm going to relate this back to the 737 MAX at Boeing. A lot of upper level managers, their ego was so big that nothing was going to change the way they were thinking, and they were going to always be right. And that's something in the corporate world that you're going to have to deal with.
Well, it's kind of like in elementary school or kindergarten, you'll always encounter some jerks in the sandbox and take your toys away. Some police in real life and just unfriendly, right? And so I like that you put the audience in the reality mindset, thinking that, hey, sometimes it's not you. it's really, there are some people out there kind of like that, and your goal is to try to keep your own sanity. Now, I want to go back to what you just said. Ask the 7 why, right?
No,
You
five,
oh, 5 why. I'm sorry. Add 2
five
more.
whys.
Why 5 why? Okay. So I want to ask this question, right? And I like the fact that you challenge our candidates to think that way. When you have an interview or when you're meeting with your clients, whatever that is, let's use your intellectual curiosity and ask the question why to your own advantage, to figure out maybe it's a cultural thing, maybe that's the way we do it with no reason. And I like that a lot, right? And I think sometimes we forgot to remind each other is our goal is not just to hear ourselves talking. Our goal is to really truly interact with the other person. And I think the way you talk about why you're doing that, and why is that the philosophy, right? This is really a fantastic way of starting, a good conversation, but extend into a relationship, right? It's no longer a monologue, but a dialogue, right? So, all right, I want to pause and encourage some of my audience. If you want to ask question, you can do exactly like what Veronica has done. She has a question for Van. It may be good to take a little different pace here and asking Veronica a question. Veronica was listening to Van and said, all right, you want to create a B scholarship, helping the B student. Can you tell us more about these scholarship? Will international students be eligible for applying to this scholarship?
That's a good question. When I was building the scholarship requirements with the folks at FIU, the only real requirement that I had was that they be B students. I don't remember the actual grade point average, but it's like to be honest, it's like a high C through just under an A. And your question about international students, and I don't remember all of the prerequisites, but there's really not that many. I think the big one was that it's supposed to be for students that don't have any college back in their background of their families. But the real thing is essentially the B grade average and not the A's, because there's so many scholarships out there for A's. I didn't want to have to compete with those.
So I'm going to answer on behalf of the business school, right? So Van gave us the money actually to help us for the students. So what I'm going to do.
But I have to die first.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my team to follow up with this question. Veronica, no worry, we'll give you more answer. If my advancement team is here, please give some email or something so we can follow up with Veronica. Now I have another attendee asking this question, Van, because you're talking about all the reality versus learning. So our audience is asking, well, in terms of reality versus learning, what would you say is the best way to push past the restrictions on graduate school education and get the job without going to grad school?
I'll be honest, I don't know that I have a great answer for that. But let me tell you, one of the key things that happened when the dean and I first met. We were talking about my time at FIU, and I said that when I was at FIU, I learned a couple of things that benefited me almost immediately after I graduated. And one of those was that I learned about learning curves, and learning curves to some extent have to do with statistics. And I felt like the curriculum for my bachelor's degree at FIU was superb. It was excellent. And the reason was that there was two key things. One, in order to be successful with my degree, I had to A, learn a computer language and be able to write in it. And B, my I felt to me like my minor was in statistics. That worked out to be really well because I was able to apply those skills immediately when I got to Boeing. And it was within weeks. So I'm going to digress here and tell the funny story that I told the dean a couple of weeks ago. Not soon after I had got to Boeing, where I was hired as an estimator on, and an estimator says how long it's going to take to make an individual product or a piece of a product, and how long it's going to, what are the lead times to get the parts in to make it, etc. And this is one of my favorite stories. So I was in a room and we're sitting around a table. There were probably 6 or 7 of us, and we are giving estimates on how long it's going to take to get parts in. This is for the 757 and the 767 airplanes. And we'd go around the table and people would say, well, it's going to take 9 weeks, or it's going to take 12 weeks. And someone else would say, for my part, it's going to take 3 months. And they'd come to me and I'd say, it's going to take 6 weeks to get what I'm responsible for. And they'd go around a table and everybody would reduce their estimate by a week or 2, or say, well, if we expedite it, we can get the part in here a little quicker. And they came back to me and they said, I said, 6 weeks. They said, that's what you said last time. I said, it hasn't changed. So they go around the table again and everybody's reducing their lead time, and they're going to get the part in thing quicker, and magic is going to happen. And they got back to me and I said, 6 weeks. They said, Van, you're not playing the game. I said, you can't. Some things you just can't change. You may be able to say, well, I'll give you the vendor more money if you get it in sooner. But they'll take your money, but they won't get it in any sooner. It'll still be 6 weeks. And they said, Van, you're really not playing the game here. I said, that's okay. I'm going to stick with 6 weeks. So when we left the meeting, I had 6 weeks, because I knew if things went wrong, who were they going to blame? If it was not 6 weeks, it was going to be me. They'd say, well, that's what you said. Well, I said 6 weeks. That's what it was going to be.
Well,
So,
sorry, Van. So it's, if I heard the story correctly, there's a level of integrity. You stick with the true core, what you want to answer. And I like it a lot. So let me turn around and ask you this question and help some of our audience here attending today, right? As they prepare for their new journey in life, right? Some of them may be going to graduate from undergraduate. Some of them may finishing up their graduate degree. Some of them may be alum, moving for the next career. What advice would you remind them? What make you the best candidate for the next job in terms of, like we talk about integrity, in terms of, an agile mindset? What advice would you give them that is practical, tangible? If you tell them that they can practice it?
I'm actually going to come back to what I said earlier. Listen. Try not to have any preconceived ideas about what you need. Throughout my life, when I worked on a project, I often found myself saying, the previous 2 jobs I had actually prepared me for this. It's the case with FIU and the statistics and the learning curves and things like that. What I had learned most recently in previous jobs, either it was at school or whatever, that actually prepared me for the next thing I got involved with. So you can call it fate or whatever, but life has a tendency to go in a certain path. And you may think that something you're doing may not be the right thing to be doing at this time, but often it is. Often it is.
I like that. I like what you just said. So I often have students coming to me and ask, Dean, well, I'm going to graduate from my undergraduate degree, but I'm really pondering on whether I should go on a graduate degree, right? And like, should I do it or should I wait out? What is your opinion for our students as a professional for so many years, right? What is your opinion? But I want you to talk in terms of the context of today, right? This environment, right? Should they or should they not go for a graduate degree right after they finish their undergraduate?
Well, it varies. It may depend on what type of uh, degree you are interested in. Um, I'm gonna use my niece as a example here. Right now, she is in the FIU doctorate program and for education, and specifically special education, teaching students with special needs. When she graduated from FIU, she had a degree in education, and she ended up teaching actually special needs students. And then she was teaching fourth grade for a number of years in South Broward County. And she got her master's, and I was very impressed. And more recently, she has become enrolled in not the graduate program, the doctorate program at FIU. So she did not go out and finish her undergraduate degree and her master's and then go right into the next degree. She got some real world experience under her belt. And I think that's kind of important. So at least it was in my case too, but getting out there and getting some real world experience under your belt. And I think that's very useful. And it's particularly useful in today's environment, probably maybe even more so than in the past, because things are changing so fast. And if you have good experience, that gets you a long way, actually probably further than you would think.
Right. So I'm often completely fascinated by individuals like you, right? You obviously have a very good job in Bowen, but one day you just woke up and decide, you know what? I need to understand my work-life balance. I need to understand my priority. I am just going to be a consultant. I mean, I'm sure a lot of my young students is asking, well, can it be that easy? You can just be like, I want to be working for myself from now on. I mean, it got to be a lot of gut check when you make that decision. It got to be a lot of anxiety. Talk to us a little bit about that decision. I want to hear. And maybe in hindsight, looking back, maybe I shouldn't walk out. Or maybe like, it's a great thing. I should walk out 5 years early.
So I had been with Boeing for 20 years, and I'll be quite frank, I was not particularly happy, not like I was when I first started my first 5, 10, 15 years. And a friend of mine who had previously worked for Boeing called me one day and said, I have an opportunity for you to work with the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Clinic. We're going to rewrite the cancer surveillance system. And that is used for tracking cancer within the Pacific Northwest. And the reason there is a cancer surveillance system is cancer is considered an epidemic within the country. And there are 13 regions around the country where there are cancer centers where they track all cases of cancer. And he said, I think you would be a good addition to the project. And to me, I'd had my 20 years and I felt like this was the opportunity knocking with a sledgehammer. And I said, I'm in. And my wife was thinking, oh my God, Van's gonna leave Boeing, where he has a stable career, where he has a pension, etc. He has good health care, and he's gonna go out on his own. And the good news was that she was extremely supportive. She didn't say, I'm worried. I know she was. I was worried. Going out on your own is scary. but I was unhappy, and it was the thing to do at the time. So it's the decision to do this. It depends on your personal circumstance and the support that you're going to get. And I was fortunate that she was working full time so I could get my health care through her. And a lot of times that's not the case. And you have to, in some people, they may not be able to get health care, and that because that's a very important thing that you need to consider. But it was a very scary time for me to go out on my own, but it was something I needed to do.
Right.
It was self-fulfilling.
Right. You have to be honest with yourself, sometimes to follow your heart. You know, my husband, an entrepreneur, the same way, right? It's a lot of anxiety, right? You have to make it on your own. But it seems like you talk about you have a very supportive spouse, and at the time, the circumstance allow you to do so. And I know that a lot of students always ask that question. I want to be an entrepreneur, but I don't know where to begin. It seems like, you know, as a consultant, it's very much an entrepreneur, right? You got to bring the business, you got to make it work, make sure that it's going to be a positive, you know, ROI. So now I'm going to wrap up this discussion today. We're getting very close to the hour. I always also want to encourage some of our audience, if you have a question, please ask Ben. He's available right now. Now, but before I go, I want you to share with our audience, hey, what are you reading lately? What are your exercise routine? How do you keep yourself even keel when this COVID-19, you know, coming down on everyone? What do you do to keep your sanity?
So that's sort of a funny question because, you know, I've been writing my travel books, and I haven't been reading as much probably as I usually do or like to, because I've been writing. So I've been just the opposite. So in fact, this morning I was putting one of the final segments on try this again, putting the final words in one of my segments for my new travel book. And my goal was to have it be 205 pages, but I was a little short. And this morning I added some words because during the night I had a little voice in my head told me, you didn't explain enough. So this morning I went back in and I put in some explanations, and I hit the goal just before this talk this morning. My goal, like I said, my goal was 205 pages. I hit 205 pages this morning. So now what I have to do is get my book off to my editor, and that will take month and a half for him to go through it. But next week, I have my 2 children's books that I need to get going and find illustrations for. And that's a lot harder than you would think. And if you want to self-publish, which I have been doing, it's even harder. Mm-hmm. But for the children's book, I generally want them to be hardback, and Amazon, where you can do a lot of self-publishing, doesn't do hardbacks. They only do paperbacks and print books. So that was an issue before, and it will be an issue again. Mm-hmm. But so that's mostly what I've been doing in the last several months, is consolidating and improving and rewriting and fixing and rewriting. And so I'm making progress.
That's great. You're following your heart. You are doing exactly what you preach. Now, before we end this segment, tell us, what is your exercise routine, Van?
What is what?
Your exercise routine.
I'm not understanding.
Do you have any exercise routine? Do you do anything to keep yourself physically fit?
Yes. I get up every morning and I go for a mile, it's probably a 2-mile walk with my cup of coffee. And then then I come home, and before I take my shower, I have a set of floor exercises that I do, you know, weights, push-ups, sit-ups, crunches, things like that. And that probably takes about 20 minutes. So some days I go walk 2 miles, some days it's 3. But I probably walk, I'm going to say, at least 6 days a week, and sometimes more than once, and sometimes twice. But it's,
Yeah.
I do a lot of walking, and walking is good because you can clear your head, and you'd be surprised what happens when you let your brain empty.
Right.
The thoughts that pop in.
It's kind of form of a meditation. That is fantastic. Now we're wrapping up for today's game changer success story share with our alum, Van Chestnut. And I want to thank Van for taking his time from the West Coast all the way to the East Coast. And I want to say thank you for everyone to take time to enjoy this kind of connection and look out for more opportunity to connect with some of our alum, listen to their own life experiences, and very much wisdom. So signing off, thank you very much for participating today. Thank you, Van. It was a fun talk today.
Thank you. This was fun.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.